Just for procedural sake, we need to hard stop it at 9:30 because some of us have other obligations that we already had in place. So just wanted to make that known. Mrs. Capo, Chief Financial Officer's report.
Thank you. A, approval of expenditure, MTV for transit. Sorry. The board is asked to approve the purchase of a 9-passenger MTV Package 16 Ford Transit Microbird per the attached specifications at a cost of $88,826 as recommended by the Chief Financial Officer and Director of Transportation. This is the van. We did budget for this. We weren't planning on buying it until later, but this particular van is available now, unlike a lot of the other vehicles we bought where it's 18 to 24 months out. And so that's why we put that on today's agenda. And then B, approval of bid communication services. The board is asked to accept the bid in the amount of $332,135.18 from Communication Services for the district bidirectional antenna system as recommended by the Chief Financial Officer and Director of Maintenance and Operations. And that concludes my Chief Financial Officer special report.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
The antenna system we already approved to go to bid, is that what it was?
We approved, yeah, we approved it earlier and we also approved it as part of the 070 account. So 300,000 of that was already set aside in the 070. So the 32 will come out of the 03.
Okay.
This is the one we talked about
Yeah,
2 meetings ago.
right, with the change in the fire code, this is the necessary purchase.
Okay, roll call, please.
Mrs. Foley,
Yes.
Mr. Leidick,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Goldstein.
Mrs. Trevsker,
Yes.
and Mrs. Seoli.
Yes.
Okay, old business, and we're here primarily to discuss the Champion Farms property. Typically at these meetings, we don't have public participation, but because of the nature of the meeting and we wanted this to be a bit of a back and forth discussion, so we're gonna open it up more than is typical here. So can you introduce yourself and tell us who you are and,
Sure,
okay.
thank you.
Yes.
Good morning, my name is Mark Kerslake with the Province Group. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me. I have a presentation that I can give, and I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has about the proposed project.
Okay.
Great. Well, thank you.
Before you speak, like if
Sure.
you don't mind, if you're like here for this, if you could tell us who you are, just so that everyone is on the same page with, like, do you think now or before?
Everything.
Okay, if you don't mind introducing yourselves.
Matthew Sagoni from Squire Patton Boggs, legal counsel to the school district.
Lou Goliath with the Perry Schools. Jim Gussick, Mayor of Perry Village.
Jim O'Leary, solicitor of Perry Village.
Ollie Siegel, Jed.
Bob Parker, I'm the village engineer.
Karen Sunday, Township Administrator and Jed Fiscal Officer.
Alex Russo, I'm with Cushman Wakefield Cresco Real Estate. I represent the land that's a question.
Thank you. Okay.
Great, well, thank you.
That's not confidential.
We're gonna talk about,
Just so you know.
Yeah, just so you know, this, like, it's an open session, so we're not in executive session, so it's not
Sure.
confidential.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I appreciate that, thank you. Just a bit about my company, Province Group. It's a company I founded over 33 years ago. We've been in business for over 3 decades. I'm the principal of the company, highly involved in everything we do. We're a well-capitalized development company. My team has over about 100 years of collective development experience. On every project, we assemble a top-tier team of consultants. I think you'll see that here. We also have a very good relationship with First Energy, which is important here where you learn more about the project that we're contemplating. The real estate, I think that you are all familiar with it. The former Champion Farm property. It's cursor. It's bisected by the limits there, that dash line running east to west. You have Perry Village property to the south. North of that is the township and the JED. It's roughly 130 acres in the village and about 47 north in the township and JED area, right over here, obviously. The magenta lines running north-south are a set of First Energy 345 kilovolt power lines, which is one reason that, main reason that drew us to the property. So that's the site, the land that we are talking about. And our proposal for it is a data center campus. And for those of you that aren't familiar with it, it's a high-tech IT facility that houses computer servers and processors that run various applications and store data and run software applications. It's called a mission-critical facility. They run 24/7, 365, always on, a lot of redundant systems. They're very robust buildings, 1 or 2 story, with very sophisticated systems for security, climate control, air filtration, equipment cooling, and fire suppression. And the uses, it's everything we're all familiar with when we think of the cloud. The cloud resides in the data center. So it's Facebook, Instagram, online banking, health records, your merchant accounts, everything that you think about that we all do on our phones or our computers. That data is stored in a facility like that. That's an image of the data hall with the stacks of the racks that contain the servers. And a lot of evolving that we're all learning about is machine learning and AI. That's an evolution too that's happening with data centers. I talked a little bit about our team. Gensler is the project architect. They're the largest architectural firm in the world, in business since 1965. They have 53 offices around the globe. They've developed data centers across 5 continents. They're the project architect. And in terms of the appearance, the look and feel of data centers, they look like Class A type industrial buildings that you're probably all familiar with. The front of each building has a typical office component where you have, employee offices, workspaces, conference rooms, break rooms, kitchens, restrooms, that type of thing. And in the back of the house is the data hall that I showed a minute ago, which is almost like a white space clean room type thing where the computers and servers and switchgear reside. So the appearance of, high quality industrial buildings, we call it a campus because these are often arrayed in complexes of multiple buildings, which is what we would do here. So it's not a single, like a 1 million square foot Amazon or Walmart distribution center. They're smaller buildings that are built in phases. So that's why you'll hear me refer to it as a data center campus. And that's why it would be a series of these buildings. And in terms of their use and their impact to a community, and here's another image of inside the data hall with the racks of servers and switchgears. It's interesting, data centers are somewhat of a benign use to a community, but they provide enormous economic benefits as you'll see. So a couple things they don't do. They don't create much vehicular or truck traffic. Again, going back to like a distribution center, an Amazon type building, they don't have the truck trips associated with that type of use. They don't have large impacts to schools or parks or services like police, fire, EMS, that type of thing. They're very robust, self-contained, secured facilities. What they do, on the other hand, and I'll show you, we'll look at some numbers, they create a significant positive economic impact on the community. And they provide a lot of high quality IT jobs, information technology, a lot of complex systems within the buildings that require mechanical and electrical engineers to maintain. You have systems experts, facility management, that type of thing. Also, a lot of high quality construction jobs. A project like this is probably a 5-year-ish build out. So you have a lot of high quality construction jobs to build a sophisticated building like this. And they really, enhance modern living through technology, which we're all experiencing and learning to deal with. So on this site in particular, depending on the final acreage, the build out would be 1.5 to as much as 2 million square feet. Again, built in phases over probably 5 years. It fits based on about 1.5 million feet, it's just the real property investment is about $1 billion. The buildings themselves are between $800 and $1,000 a square foot just to build the building. That doesn't include the contents of it or any of the servers or switchgear. So it's quite an investment. In terms of jobs, I think that's an important dynamic for everyone. It's probably at that scale, 150 to 200 direct full-time jobs, high quality, well-paying jobs within the data center. The salaries ranging from probably low of $50,000 up to $175,000 a year. I'm going to show you in a minute a study that was done in Northern Virginia, but for every job inside a data center, there are, according to the study, about 4.1 jobs created outside of the data center. So that's another 600 to 800 jobs created outside the facility. There's a whole ecosystem that goes into supporting a project like this, and that's what those jobs are. The project timeline, I touched on that, roughly a 5-year build out. I'll touch on this just quickly. These are the types of jobs, obviously, computer and information research, network architects, obviously computer programmers, analysts, database administrators. Some of the salary ranges that you see here, those types of jobs down to facilities management and security. The facilities are gated, manned 24/7. A lot of good construction jobs as well. These are complicated buildings to build, so you need good people to build them. Particularly the mechanical, electrical, environmental control systems within the buildings are very complicated. And some of the indirect jobs that I spoke of earlier. This is a study done in Northern Virginia. We reference it, we have a data center project in Virginia. The Northern Virginia Technology Council did this study back in 22, and it's the study that determined about 4.1 jobs are created outside a data center for every job inside the data center. And different metrics, there are about 300 data centers in Virginia, so the metrics are different, but just billions and billions of dollars of economic impact in Virginia due to data centers. Again, we talked a little bit about the employment, payroll. I know that's important, for the village and the JED. I just chose the midpoint, about 175 jobs, probably averaging $100,000, 17.5 million of payroll within the facility. Then the indirect employment, about 700 jobs outside of the facility, perhaps a $60,000 average, another $42 million of payroll, not all direct at the facility, but being provided to the facility. So about $60 million of payroll. And then obviously that has an economic ripple effect that resonates throughout the economy and the community and businesses, shops, the village pub. Everyone benefits from the ripple effects of the payroll and the spending that occurs at a facility like this. And then here's the real horsepower. $1 billion facility, and we worked with the county to go through their assessment and millage rates and so forth. $1 billion facility and build out will pay over $27 million a year in property taxes. This shows the distribution of those taxes for the village. I'll show the township in a minute. They're very, very similar, as you might imagine. We're here at the schools. The schools get about half of that, so that's $14 million to the Perry schools annually at build out. So these facilities are a monster in terms of the economic contribution to the county and to the various departments, and you can see the dispersion of the funds, who gets incremental property tax base. That's the township. Excuse me, that was the village. The township is slightly different. The schools get 49% and the township 15.8%. The village, I'm not sure why, but slightly different. But very, very similar in terms of the the distribution of the property tax revenue. Power, some people think about power and how that might, affect others. First off, know that it's, as you might imagine, it's a highly regulated industry. You have the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio, PUCO starts there. Then you have a group called PGIM. That's called an RTO, a Regional Transmission Organization. So that's who has responsibility for the grid. It's migrated a little bit, but it was PJM because that was Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Maryland. That's how it kind of started, but now it's grown. In fact, it goes into Indiana, the eastern. We have data center projects in Indiana as well, and one of those is in PJM. So they're an RTO. They manage the grid in terms of reliability, power distribution, coordinating the system with the various power providers within the PGIM network. So we're within PGIM here. First Energy is the power provider. It's actually a subsidiary of theirs called the Illuminating Company that we work with, but it's First Energy, they're a New York Stock Exchange company. And then you obviously have the federal level, the Energy Regulatory Commission as well. So it's very highly regulated. And then First Energy performs detailed load studies. So they model all the existing demand, forecasted demand from other projects, and then they layer in the demand of our proposed project. And they do these highly detailed, very complicated load studies to make sure that their network, their grid can serve the intended facility. And this is important to note too. So we take power from regional transmission lines. I mentioned the 345 kV lines on the site. So we take power from transmission lines, whereas local homes and businesses are served off distribution lines, which are normally 69 kilovolts or less. So we're not even on the same circuit that is providing power. The power we have in this building is coming off a distribution line. We're taking power off transmission lines, so it's a different circuit. And then First Energy has a program called Energize 365. They have a $26 billion grid investment plan that they're undertaking. It's ongoing now. For the next 4 years, they're going to spend $26 billion on their grid enhancement. That's an ongoing project. So we work very closely with the folks at First Energy. Just to wrap up here, and I appreciate your patience, just to summarize, these projects, our project would be a significant source of tax revenue, over $27 million a year at build out. The school get about half that, $14 million go to the schools. This helps decrease the tax burden on local residents. I saw some signs driving in this morning about no taxes, no tax increases in people's front yards. A project like this helps that because of the contribution. It helps relieve the burden on others. It's a significant source of payroll tax revenue. I touched on that, the job creation. Again, helping diversify the tax base between a project like this and taking the burden off of residential taxpayers. It's a low traffic generator. It has very limited vehicle and truck trips. My last slide. Thanks for your patience. New jobs we talked about with wages above prevailing wages, providing a lot of ongoing fiscal stimulus that benefits all of the local government agencies, public works. We talked about, police, fire, all of those different agencies benefit. There are also some interesting synergies with the high school, Lakeland Community College, University of Akron, et cetera. Your STEM programs. A data center can provide some interesting opportunities, whether it's internships or tours, but exposure to, obviously these are technology-rich facilities, and the people that work there are very, educated and highly adept at technology. But also the E part of that, the engineering. I mentioned the mechanical and electrical systems within these buildings are complicated. So not only the technology, but the engineering dynamics of these buildings as well. So I think could be some interesting tie-ins there. And then there, again, very little school or park impacts and not impacting things like police and fire and EMS. That's my last slide.
So in
So
this,
thank you.
thank you. So in this, what is your role? Because you're not the data center owner. So what is your company's role?
We're the owner, we're not the operator. right?
Okay.
So well, think of us as the developers. So we acquire the land, get all of the land use approvals and build the buildings. And then we lease, typically it's leased to someone who operates it. So we're not the operator of, the internal
Right.
system.
So you already have an end buyer that wants to lease from you.
We work with all the brand names that you know of thank you.
And that's gonna do that.
Our companies that we work with.
Okay.
That's right.
So I noticed in the images, you have like a lot of samples of other data centers, but do you have any that you guys have done?
Well, several. As I mentioned, we have a project ongoing in Richmond right now. Similar size, it's about 1.3 million square feet, and we have several in Indiana.
So there are built already?
Not built, various stages.
Oh, okay.
Various stages.
Like, are they in the construction stages or
Not
still?
yet. Not
Okay,
yet.
so you haven't built one before?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
In terms of like,
But we built similar, you could view them as complicated industrial buildings,
Okay.
which we've done. Tilt-up concrete industrial buildings. These are that to the next level, mainly in terms of the mechanical, electrical, environmental systems. But
Okay.
very similar to buildings we've done, but with more advanced systems.
So you're gonna build a spec then?
Pardon me?
You're gonna build a spec, you're gonna identify who's going to
But we'll know
occupy the
ahead of
building,
time.
and
We'll
you're
know
gonna
ahead of time.
do all the electrical and all of that, and then they're gonna come in and backfill with all the data
Correct.
center stuff.
so you have, in the agreement, it's how many years, 3 years for due diligence, correct?
No, it's less than that. It's about 6 months of diligence. Then we have time to close based on the time it's gonna take to work through we're in 2 different jurisdictions that I showed. So we need to process the land use approvals through both the township and the village. The site plan approval, the architecture, the zoning,
And then,
all of
okay, so
that.
that's gonna take 6
Yes.
months to do that, and then to close is another,
6 to 9 months later. And then we don't have zoning yet. The first thing is all the properties, and then we perform our diligence on the site. So
okay,
things like, surveying the land, doing geotechnical studies, environmental studies. We have some gas wells that we're dealing with on part of the village property. So a lot of site due diligence goes into this. We're working with Bob Parker on the utilities. We've had some conversations, sewer and water, going through those dynamics. So that's our due diligence phase. Then, as I said, we work with the village and the township for zoning, architecture, site plan approval, lighting, landscaping, everything it takes to design the
Okay.
project. We need to seek those approvals.
and then after that's done, then you have about 5 years
We don't have that long under the contract.
to construct it, like 5 years of construction.
Correct, but the first building would break ground. So after we get all the land use approvals, then we move into detailed civil engineering and architecture, where then we're getting very precise about the grading plans, street, road improvements, sewer, water, all the civil engineering dynamics, and then also the architecture, working with Gensler to move forward on the exact building plans,
Right.
designs, all that. That can take about a year, and then it's permitting the buildings themselves through the village and the town, so we can get to pulling a grading permit and a building permit for the first building. And then the buildings, each building is typically between 230 and 280,000 square feet. Kind of give you
So
an
how many
idea.
buildings are we looking at total?
What's
How
that?
many buildings approximately are we looking at total?
5 or 6.
So, I'm sorry, go ahead.
There was a purchase agreement that was already signed. I thought that the due diligence was 18 months for due diligence with a potential extension of 18 months. That's where we're coming up with 3 years.
Right.
So it is
That's
3,
about, yeah.
so it is 3
So
years
if
of due
it's-
diligence.
I'm just going from the tax perspective and what the benefit to the school
Sure.
would be. So if we were looking at 3 years of due diligence and then 5 years of build out permits, all that stuff till you have the first building up. So that's 8 years out. And then if I would assume there's been some discussion of some kind of tax abatement. So that could last potentially I don't know what you guys have discussed as far as tax abatements, but up to what, 10 years is,
We haven't, they could be, I mean, that's typical.
so we're looking at 18 years before full tax on the property?
I would say less than that. Your timeline is a little longer than we would hope to move faster at the front end than you mentioned. But it is a 5-year build out. But it's gaining every year. It's paying nothing now,
Right,
right? So it's a matter of how quickly, the demand is incredible. Most of these facilities, like in Northern Virginia, there's less than a 2% vacancy rate. And a lot of markets are like that. Columbus has a lot of data centers.
well, right, but I
Well,
mean, I think that Northern Virginia and Columbus is a little bit different than Perry Village, Ohio. I mean, the cost of living certainly is different
Very
too, so I would kind of adjust those, the salaries would probably be adjusted down. I think we're at like 35% less cost of living than Northern Virginia. So I'm just, from a tax perspective, on the benefit to the schools and the benefit to our taxpayers, we're looking at probably at 15 to 18 years before we're fully receiving
Maybe a little
taxes.
less, but order of magnitude,
10 plus.
right, that's fair.
Quick
To full
question.
build, to full build
That's
out.
so we realize the full tax.
Full build
But they'll
out. But
be-
it's, again, it's incremental. There'll be, say it's 5 buildings, there'll be 1/5, 2/5.
Right,
It's gonna be escalating as each building is completed.
So therefore, also that impacts the number of employees, right? So if it's done in
Correct.
phases, the number of employees is not gonna start off at 200 or 150
That's right.
employees.
That's right.
Of those employees, how many in data centers actually work on site versus how many of them are remote?
Well, almost all of them are on site. Within that, call it 175 people that would work at the facility, they're at the facility, right? Some of the other 600, 700 jobs outside the facility, some of those are remote, and some of those might be, vendors as well, maybe coming from Cleveland or, so that, I'm not gonna represent that all that payroll would be
Yeah,
here
that would
because
be
it
here.
wouldn't be.
Right.
Right. So
That's
that'll
awesome.
be the 175 to 200 employees, that's here in the facility. The others would be more dispersed.
so, and from, like, once the data center is built, the traffic impact and roads and things like that will be minimal, but I would assume during the construction phase, because we're talking heavy equipment,
Correct.
to bring in steel, then the things
Correct.
needed to build, that will be ongoing for 5 years.
Correct. Right.
Could we take a look at the land map?
Sure. And all that can come in on, Route 20.
Yeah, that was something I was gonna.
Well, yeah,
ask.
as long as the JED and township are on
Yeah.
board with it, it can come through. But if they don't agree with it, then you have to come down Main Street, Narrows Road,
Well, that's,
Center.
or Center.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, obviously,
And you're looking, I'm
we
sorry,
would take the construction, would come in there. As with the entrance to the, the facility, we'll have a secondary entrance, but typically there's only one main entrance to the data center complex.
So that entrance would be on Route 20.
Right.
So the setback and everything, the restriction that we have on the land as far as the path for
Right.
our cross-country team
Right.
around the perimeter of the property,
Right.
why wouldn't that be able to stay intact?
Well, it gets, and I know, the mayor's been talking with you about that. I guess our concern would be where is it routed? From a liability standpoint, we wouldn't want to own the land under the trail, just, for liability's sake, trip and fall, injuries, who knows what could happen. We wouldn't want the liability for that. The entire projects, these are fenced, gated, highly secured projects. So, in fact, often there's 2 perimeter fences. There's an inner and an outer fence. I think it creates site plan complications. I know we were hoping that could be accommodated elsewhere, but I know that's one of the topics to be discussed.
So supposing that you do get into due diligence and for some reason the project can't move forward, the electrical load, for some reason, whatever you're looking at, it
Right.
can't move, what happens?
Well, we would have to bow out of the contract and the landowners would have to consider other uses.
And there's also gas wells on the property right now, right? 5 or 3?
2.
2?
So I know what I've read in some of the other places where you're working, maybe Virginia, Bristol, I think you have one in Bristol.
You've done your homework.
Yes, so if you.
Bristol is in Indiana.
Yes, so if you do those, and in those agreements, if you back out, then housing goes in, like apartment complexes. That's not the case here.
Or industrial. Well, Alex can speak to that too. Alex with Cushman Wakefield, is the listing agent on the property. The property's been on the market a number of years
Right.
without other offers. So,
I think some of the things that we looked at was, we did not want housing.
Right.
So some of the things that we looked at were the industrial, bringing job creation to the site. And when we talked about, what other uses could be out there, I mean, housing, we had, major housing developers that wanted to come in and take large tracts of land. And it was just something that, was not, no one wanted more housing out there.
Okay,
So really, we're looking at industrial, which would be, as we're finding with the other land that I'm representing, industrial seems to be the use up here. It's the one that's going to be creating probably the most jobs. The office market is really non-existent anymore. We have, in the way this plan has been designed, along Route 20, we've retained all of the frontage. If you notice the small entrance to the site, and one of the things that we negotiated early on is the distance between the entrance and, I can't read that. Middle Ridge. So all that is going to be land that's going to be retained, which we feel is going to be land for hopefully some complementary service to this. Whether it's going to be, some type of form of retail. And we feel the land value, the value of that land is going to be dramatically increased by having this facility, as well as other land that we're seeing. I mean, we have a contract right now for 13 acres that we have been pretty surprised at the dollar amounts that we're getting, where we were selling the land previously in the $10,000 to $12,000 range. We're now hitting 25, and I think it's going to be increasing. So we're already seeing some values increasing in the land. That piece along Route 20, we feel is going to be, very, very worthwhile. Also, we kept the depth on it, so it's not just some narrow frontage. So there's a decent use for development there. So when we looked at the overall project, we looked at what's the smallest impact on the main route. And when you get into a parcel of land with really no frontage anywhere else, and the type of development that can be done on a site like that, it really comes down to, someone who wants no visibility, no access, and really, large industrial buildings is what we're really looking at. And so we've been trying to establish that. And this was the first. The other thing was the amount of land that they're taking in one chunk, I think is the big thing.
Mm-hmm.
We're not dealing with infrastructure. What I mean by that is if we were to develop this site, and let's just say that we came in and said, okay, well, we're going to put this big industrial park here. All right, well, guess what? Someone's got to put a road in here, and someone's got to bring all the utilities, sewer, water, et cetera, to this site. And let's say we came in and put a nice big cul-de-sac in here, and we started having all these nice parcels of land. The cost in the infrastructure, I have an engineer. How many dollars per square foot, per square linear foot is it to create a industrial road to go back
With utilities.
with utilities? $1,000 a linear foot?
Probably more than that.
Yeah, okay. So let's just take, for example, that this might be a mile, half a mile. So to develop this ourselves and to develop a project, the cost of the infrastructure to do this would be monumental. And I don't think anybody would be, I don't think I can come to you and say, well, I've got someone that wants to buy 20 acres back here, but it's going to cost us $7 million to bring the road and the utilities in to sell a site at $60,000 an acre. So when we looked at this, what can it be and what's the best use for it? So that was really sort of how we looked at the marketing of it. And to me, it was like, if we could find somebody that's gonna come in, don't let them hear this. If we can find somebody that's gonna come in and take the chunk of it, put all the infrastructure in on their dime, give us a little tiny throat road there to access it, give us some good frontage, and then let them develop this and bring the job creation in without us having the infrastructure cost, is really what I think was the win. So.
So,
The other thing,
Go ahead.
oh, sorry. I was gonna add to that, typical, we do light industrial buildings, they're about $100 a foot versus these data center buildings are about $1,000 a foot. So the taxes are about 10 times as high. Also with industrial, you get a lot more truck trips. This has fewer truck trips and probably 8 to 10 times the valuation. So it's a monster compared to a typical industrial park. And the scale, I'm prepared to buy 180 acres all at once versus a 13-acre sale, a 15, what's a typical industrial sale around? Bob, you do them, is it 15 acres?
It all depends on the site.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're buying 10 times that in one fell, more than 10 times that in one fell swoop. So it's a very different scale.
The benefit of the industrial site would be that there's more jobs probably than what this would be.
Much lower paying, right?
But you're right, quantity over,
You want high-tech IT jobs or, a lot of those buildings are, it's either assembly, light assembly, doesn't very much. If it's distribution, it's a lot of, forklift operators. I mean, the pay scale is dramatically different. It's a very, very different type facility.
yeah, I'm a Lincoln Electric kid, so my dad grew up at Lincoln, worked
Yeah.
at Lincoln Electric for 35 years,
Right.
so I'm pretty familiar with the industrial
Right.
side of things
Oh,
and,
good.
the different levels of salary there.
Yeah.
You had something?
I do, so does Jesse.
I was just gonna ask,
Sure.
I know you said there would be a secondary entrance on Main Street there in the village.
Right.
What does that look like compared to the entrance that's coming off of 20? I mean, there's a ton of houses there, the library is there. What are these homeowners gonna look at?
Well, down there would just be a fence with a gate. The guardhouse would be, once you get into the project coming down that entry through. Part of it is literally just economics because they're manned 24/7.
Okay.
You only want to pay one guard, not two. And we want to be sensitive to the residents down there. So the manned gate guard, it would be up there. But for, emergency situations, we have to have a second point of egress.
I just didn't know what, you live across the street from it, and what am I looking at? I got the library, I've got trees and stuff
Right.
now. Am I gonna be looking at
A data
a
center.
wall?
Industrial park.
Yeah.
Fences with, barbed wire? I mean, I don't know what your security thing is,
Yeah.
but it's, what are they looking at?
Well, we've talked with the township and the village about that. We talked about, buffer conditions. We call them sensitive edge conditions, but it's that. So the ball fields, your fields that are here, the library obviously is a pond behind it, but, and coming up, behind, the village offices, having a series of berms, landscaping. There's gonna be a landscape plan showing those buffers that would be, have to be approved by the village and the township.
Does that buffer the sound as well?
What's that?
Does that buffer the sound
Yes.
from it as well? So like, what's the decibels that puts out?
You asked really good questions.
Thank you.
We've been doing research for
Yeah, that's
6
great.
months.
We
That's
represent the taxpayer, so it's important to us to ask the questions that they'll have.
Yeah, probably the high would be around 70 decibels, which is about like a dishwasher or a washing machine.
And how far does
At the
that
At the
extend?
property line,
At the property line? It doesn't
Yeah.
extend past that?
correct. Well, then it dissipates, but, typically we can maintain about 70 dB at the property line, not more than that.
Couple other things. You mentioned
Sure.
it doesn't impact police or fire. I mean, I'm understanding that these take a lot of water to cool them, right?
Correct.
Which we already have a nuclear plant here, so we understand cooling
Right.
system. Not that we
Right.
understand cooling systems, but they
Right.
need them.
you see them.
So we see them, yeah, we see them. They know they cool something and it goes into the lake.
Right.
So with 150 employees on site, there's a potential, and with the heat that these generate, there's certainly potential to impact the need for police or fire for some sort of catastrophic event or an emergency. my question or concern is, what would that look like? Do we have the capacity to handle something, should something of that magnitude happen? Because I guess, I know you said it doesn't impact them. I think it certainly could, and it's something we need to be cognizant of.
Right.
In addition, Perry Township doesn't have.
And they don't have a
their own-
fire.
Right.
Right.
Or
Police, I mean, their own police.
Right. Well, I think in that respect, what we think about compared to a lot of other facilities, a lot of other uses, number one, it starts with the security. As I said, these are fenced, sometimes 2 perimeter fences, manned 24/7, in terms of access control, right? It's very limited access control. So in terms of we think about any crime or break-in, it just doesn't happen at a data center. You can't get in. They're very secure, facilities. So you don't have crime. So that's what we mean for the police dynamic. And then also you have all these system engineers that are there, 24/7 manning all the systems with, monitors and alert devices and sensors, so someone's always there all the time, unlike the other facilities they close, people go home, no one's there, something could happen. In terms of fire suppression, there's an inert gas fire suppression system in the data hall. There's going to be tens of millions of dollars of computer servers. So we and the operator more than anyone do not want a fire. So there's an inert gas fire suppression system that's in the data hall, and then conventional fire suppression in more the office area that I described, kind of the front of the house, if you will. So that's what we mean when we say, not impacting, is because of the value of the building and the contents. No one more than us and the operator want to make sure nothing ever happens to that facility.
And the amount of, the strain on electrical grids, and then also the water in terms of cooling, what happens to that water? Does it evaporate? Is it reused? How does that work? Can you talk about any of those two
Sure.
resources?
You guys ask very good questions. I went to a data center conference in DC, and there were about 20 seminars on cooling. It is an evolving technology, as you might imagine. There are a number of different cooling systems, conventional water cooled to, what's called a closed loop system. If you think more of like a car's radiator, where it recycles a glycol solution, through a system that gets topped off occasionally, to now immersive cooling, where actually the actual chips on the processors are submerged in like a mineral oil substance. So there's actually fluid in contact. That's mainly for the AI type data centers, which run a GPU, graphical processing unit, instead of a CPU like we all have in our computers. Those GPUs run hot because they're processing far more, like 7 times the amount of data as a CPU. They run very hot. So that might be an immersive cooling system where those chips are submerged actually in a fluid. From the water standpoint, and Bob, I know, could speak to this, and we've had conversations with Bob and he with the county. The county said, I think, Bob, how much water do you want?
There's a 24-inch water main on Route 20, and Randy Roethlisberger, the head of utilities, said that we could pretty much get the water we wanted from that.
So is it recycled, the water?
Some of it gets recycled.
Is there a retention pond, or where does it go? I mean, where
Well,
does
we have to do our own stormwater management, so we're gonna have our own stormwater detention ponds. But that's more for rain, to control runoff, from the project, in terms of stormwater.
But anything that's recycled will go through chillers on site, right?
Yes. So
And the electric, the
you have
strain on electric?
there's a fair amount of evaporation, right?
I know you mentioned First Energy and the
Yeah.
power that's there and everything, but everything I keep reading too about data centers is the amount of strain it puts on an electric grid.
Mhm.
Surrounded in a residential area, this is not an industrial area by any means, obviously we're right next to a school.
Right.
So what does that look like in terms of the electrical drain and?
Well, again, it's those
Substation.
345 kV lines. Those are regional transmission lines. That's what we're tapping. That's why we're here, because of those. It's the size of the land, right? Is the scale we want. You mentioned our data center in Bristol. That's more like 250 acres. A little bit larger than this one. Our project in Richmond is more like this. That's about 130 acres in Richmond, Virginia. So similar scale, but it's the power. We've already done a conceptual load study with First Energy, so we have that. We did that only 6 months ago, and then we had it refreshed about 3 months ago. And we're now at the stage where we would move into a detailed load study. I gave part of the excerpts of that to Karen and Jim. That's a $250,000 study. So that's a next step for us, is to write a $250,000 check to First Energy to perform a detailed load. So we've done the conceptual load study and we're fine. Now we take it to the next level of this detailed load study, which costs $250,000.
So that's part of the due diligence as well?
Exactly.
How long does that study take now?
Jen,
6 months.
close that line.
So I have a question. We've heard all the positive impacts and
Sure.
there are many. What are the largest negative impacts that people experience?
Good question. I think, well, water, people are concerned. I just mean in different jurisdictions. Again, we're operating these and doing these projects in 3 different states right now. Water is a concern. What does it do to our water resources here? You have a significant water resource, obviously. Power, how does it affect the grid? People are, have concerns about that. I mentioned all those agencies that are there to make sure that doesn't happen. Appearance, that you asked about, what are people looking at, the neighbors, the people in the community, when you drive, how do you physically experience, what does it look like? What does it feel like? Not much on traffic because there's not a lot of traffic from these.
Other than 200 people
Facilities.
driving into work.
What's that?
Other
There's
than
shifts, right? There's
three
shared.
shifts of 75 people?
Yeah.
Correct, but
Driving in.
compared to other uses, I mean,
Yeah.
if it's
And-
manufacturing, the employee count might be a multiple of what we would
Yeah.
have. Or if it's industrial, the truck trips would be a multiple of what this would generate.
That's a little bit of a concern of mine, is the traffic flow, because when we talked years ago, and I'm going back years ago, about the potential for an additional 50 slots at Perry schools for open enrollment policy, just for 50 kids to attend, there was a concern in our community about 50 more families driving their kids into school. So that's something I think I'm concerned about, especially with Route 20. We have accidents on Route 20 all the time. The police force, that sort of thing. So having an additional 50 to 75
We used to
people
have
per shift
1,900
driving in.
kids. We used to have 1,900 kids here.
Yeah.
And so our traffic pattern is 500 kids less than it used to be.
But not all at 16 and older.
Well,
You gotta gauge it,
yeah,
right? Not
so
all of
you're
our
still
5-year-olds
talking
are driving.
150, We've reduced our bus loads, but sure.
Would they do some sort of I'm thinking, because 20 is narrow too.
Mhm.
Would there be the possibility to have a lane added at the entrance to remove that from the flow of traffic? Does that make
Sure.
sense?
Yeah.
Just a small one, but
Yeah, turn lane. Yeah, that's
essentially, yes, but
traffic, we haven't done a traffic study yet. That's another part of our diligence, doing the traffic study and then submitting that study to the county as well as the township. So we really, we have to work with all three, right? So the county is the water and sewer purveyor, state road, county road, local road. So for us, it's working in terms of getting all of our approvals. It's the county, the township, the village.
And the Route 20 is going to be widened in 26, so Route 20
So,
should be improved.
It's already started.
Like really minimal right on both sides,
Yeah.
like 2 feet maybe on both sides.
yeah,
Yeah, and it's not a
There would
lot.
typically be a turn lane
okay.
pulling into the project.
And then another concern, you talk about security, and I get you're keeping that contained and secure so no one can access.
Right.
What about any type of attacks on a center like that because they have such critical information? Is there concern about that? Is there a precedent for that?
I don't know the data center being attacked.
And we obviously have the power plants. It's not like we don't have any.
Double the reason to come here.
Yes.
Right, right.
But that's what I'm thinking.
Power plants are more vulnerable.
Yes, yeah. I was just thinking
If
though.
someone's gonna attack the grid, I've never, others may, I've never heard of an attack on a data center.
My concern, a concern of mine is first the taxes and what we would actually benefit from and how long it would take us to benefit
Sure.
as a school district from the taxes. The second would be, we always, like, you know, consider the safety of our students, well-being of our students, and that doesn't just extend to them at school. Like, we want to think about them extracurriculars, at home, quality of life, things like that. So if you're talking 70 decibels on that property line, our middle school football, soccer field is right there. We have a baseball field right there. There's certainly a good deal of residential homes that would be impacted. 70 decibels constantly is not considered a safe level for sound. And that's, you know, a ballpark figure is 70. I'm like, you know, just in a quick search, the typical noise level within 500 feet can get up to 80 decibels, 500 feet of the data center. So the quality of life of the people who live surrounding it, not only in what they see, but in the constant hum and sound, and of our students who are going to be participating in activities there, that's a concern of mine. I mean, I really would worry about what the impact would be. I mean, like, we have the schools right there, there's housing developments all around it. Like, it's really a residential area.
Not really. I beg to differ. It's these homes. And as you can see, this is heavily treed. In fact, and this has changed a little bit. This was the area and we went back and forth. We didn't even want to buy it. The village wanted to sell it to us. I didn't even want it. And I'm still happy to leave it behind. We went back and forth on that. So there's quite a bit of buffer behind those homes. Yeah, that's a pretty good distance that you see there. Otherwise, there are no homes around here. This is all commercial. I do recognize your ball fields, but really it's these homes, including Karen. And those are pretty far away, right? So,
Right, I'm talking more on the eastern side, like
Center Road,
like the center road side, like that's not
there's a lot of homes.
super far. There's quite a bit of homes over there.
But the distance and sound dissipate, I mean, most roads are 65, right? If you have a well-traveled road, that's 65 dBs, right? So
We don't have well-traveled
we're
roads
70
here.
over here.
I mean, the only well-traveled road here is 20. Like, we're not, this is a
Yeah.
quiet, rural, semi-rural town. So I think that I can hear the football game at my home. Like, the sound travels here because there isn't anything else here. And if you know, like, the history of here is, like, that's where the high school used to be. And so there's really nothing there. So everything travels straight across. Like, there is nothing there to buffer that sound. There's no tall trees. Everything was, like, cleared, and all the developments are newer. So there's really, the sound is a concern, like, especially for the school, extracurricular, outdoor activities.
Yeah,
It does worry me. I mean,
sure,
You
but.
hear the trains too, they go by. the
What's
train
that?
tracks. You hear the trains go by.
well, yeah, but that's like
Yeah,
a, you know, 10-minute sound and then it's gone. This is gonna be constant, 24/7.
If I could shift from, assuming that we come to, that we move forward with this and the idea of the school system, our campus serves as the hub, the center of what Perry is. I think, and you based on what a wonderful place this is to live with the Lake Metro Park systems and all the things that are happening here and are gonna sustain. Right, you have all the wonderful things in the parks and that's what's attractive. All this high-level construction companies, billions of dollars of investment, and so could we get a little creative and say, we have to travel to the YMCA over on River Road for our kids to get a realistic cross-country style trail to run on. And we have all this beautiful land everywhere. And with these, could we not do it? It seems like such a minimal type of thing. Where couldn't we come up with a creative plan to not have to spray paint all over our school system, so our middle schoolers can have a cross-country race here that people come and see, and have have a trail that would also serve cross-country runners. Which means it's not asphalt, that it's probably that cinder, which is exactly what I have over at Hidden Valley, over by my house, from the Metro Parks and the walking trails. And then when it's not being used as a track, a nice walking path. So all the thousands of dogs we don't have to walk on Perry campus all night, because that's all we see here is dogs walking. And and I just think that would be an easy solution if we would just take some time to have available, and how could we get that done? And of course, I'm not involved in all of the liability issues and the code, all the things that have to happen, but I would think we could work that out. The other piece is, we've heard First Energy for a lot of years. Wally, he trained me and Lou in the lobbying efforts that we have, because back when the promises that were made to this district when the Perry nuclear power plant came in is, our financial troubles are over. We're not gonna know what to do with the revenue that's coming in. Very similar to the sounds we heard this morning. And then here comes deregulation. And now we spend significant time lobbying with our legislators, who now turn over every, they term limit, and remember the promises that were made. And so they're looking for a reason to, and they've already tried numerous times, to phase out or end our utility tax reimbursement, which is basically a hold harmless that they did how many years ago? Well, I don't know. And so while soon as this revenue starts to come in, if we still have it, it'll be amazing. But that'll just replace revenue that we're getting in utility tax reimbursement right now from that we fight for continually, which is okay. But then what's the life expectancy of this project? Because if it's 15 or 18 years, I think the plant under new ownership, Vistra, they're recertifying for 40, right? Which is wonderful. But, it's the looming cloud of instability that we all live with here, that everyone doesn't realize, that they feel like we're just set, but we're not, because we rely heavily on our legislature. And then I wonder, with you guys and the company coming in, who's your lobbying group? Who are the people down there that are speaking for you? Because when certain things happen, we don't get the same representation, because the big folks take the good folks. It's like Squires. And so sometimes we're like, oh, we don't get Squires for this because the big folks have them, because they're awesome. And so those are just some of the concerns that I come up with, getting outside of the concerns. If the project goes forward, what does this mean long-term for, our financing and how things go, and being stable and maintain this community? So other than that.
When we first started looking at buying this property, we couldn't do it. Jed couldn't do it, Village couldn't do it. Lou and me worked on pulling this project together. The only thing the school got out of that was the cross country. They aren't getting any of this $8 million that the village is gonna get for it. Without the school, none of this would have happened.
Well, and we were able to, beat our financial forecast last year because of the interest earned on some of the investment pieces we had with what Jen and Lou did. And so, not that it was a big pot of money, but that money would have been sitting in investment areas, and we would earn interest on it, which we didn't.
But it was a win-win for everybody.
And sure, it was a win-win. And
The
we're happy to
school won,
do
the
it.
village won. And to think that this cross country, they can't stay on the outside perimeter of this. You said you're gonna put up 2 fences. Well, one fence 60 feet in. Let us run around it. It should not phase you. I can't believe we're having this discussion and we're tossing the school out. The only thing they're getting is the cross country track. And we're tossing them out. I don't even know why we're talking about this. And as far as tax abatement, are you gonna ask for tax abatement?
Probably.
Okay, so your numbers, your tax revenue are gonna be complete, those are kind of bogus. Because this, let me finish, the CRAs, you can go up to 15 years at 100%. We aren't gonna know that till you have a company that's gonna come in and ask for it. And you're talking 18 years, we might not see anything for longer than that as far as tax revenue. We don't know, because it's all these unknown. And the other thing I guess I want to clarify for myself, you don't have one operating right now that you own?
Correct,
Okay, so you haven't built one yet?
correct. We have several underway in 3 different.
But none of them are built. You're not even under construction, are you?
Correct. We built other similar,
Buildings.
Buildings.
You're you know,
correct.
Are the two, did you say the two are under construction now?
No, not yet.
Not yet.
This would be a spec, because Andy asked them, that would be a spec.
I know we discussed some of the possible like pollution issues, and I apologize if I'm just forgetting it. As far as like, about anything in our groundwater again, I know we talked about that briefly, but I mean, what are the chances? It happens, I know there's been plumes before, all over the country, that, companies came and said, hey, there's not an issue, and then you've got a giant lawsuit, in the middle of nowhere in Kansas, because there was pollution. And that's the last thing I want for anyone in this community to ever go through. Because I know some residents in that particular area in Kansas, it hit them hard, and it really screwed a lot of things up. And I don't want that to happen to anything near here. So what sort of, fail safes, what kind of, I know you can't guarantee anything guaranteed because nothing's 100%, but I don't want any of that affecting the groundwater. There's too many people around here.
Right. Well, data centers don't use, chemicals or toxic substances. And part of the building looks like an office building, and the rest of it is a data hall with computers and servers and switchgear, cooling equipment, that type of thing.
So there's pretty much, are you saying more or less there should be no issues with that whatsoever?
Well, and they're also,
The
because
oil
they're also
wells in the
manned.
park would be more of a concern.
Sure, I know, that wasn't, I just want to know, because like Andy was bringing up, you got, this stuff's got to be cool, and all that stuff, and I just want to make sure nothing is going to be.
Sure. I think we do store diesel fuel for the emergency generators, have diesel fuel, belly tanks under the generators, they're double walled, they have overflow, protection, so when they're filling them, there's not, spillage as they're filled. They have leak detection monitors, they're double walled. Aside from diesel fuel for the generators, there's no
Potential threat, you say.
substances or chemicals that are involved, right?
So when all this, I'm sorry, are
No,
you?
it's okay, I just want to say thank you.
So when I wasn't here, I wasn't in the room when all the discussion happened surrounding the purchase of this property. And it's not typical for a school district to purchase a property. So I know that there was some conversation had with the intention, and we have some people in the room who were in the conversations. So and anyone who was here, in your opinion, I don't know how much you can talk about because I know some of it was confidential, but in your opinion, does this align with the original intent of the purchase of the property?
I would say that this would be the ultimate solution, or the ultimate goal here is to sell off the entire piece to a single developer who's willing to make a long-term investment. We sat on it how long already? Like, has it been 4 or 5 years?
Oh, yeah.
I think it was
So from a time perspective,
16 or 17.
we've already sat on it, but I think the agreement then was that residential would be messy, would put a strain on the schools. Industrial, whether heavy or light, concerns me more because half my family's buried in that cemetery right there, and the kind of traffic and noise that would be involved there would, I don't think the community would like it at all. So I don't want to say lesser of the evils. I think this is exactly what I would have wanted personally back when we talked about this. And I'm an IT guy, so I'm big into data centers and all that stuff. There's a lot that's going to go into this, and if this is I'm assuming it's going to be some sort of probably something to do with artificial intelligence. It's going to be massive investment. You're going to put a substation in there, right, tying off those transmission lines. I understand the noise issues, but again, I think it's the lesser of all of the other evils. Considering long-term construction, of commercial and the noise involved with commercial, and then the strain of housing there. So
That's why we capped it at 50
Right.
houses.
Yeah.
50 residential dwellings, I believe, right? And
We did a public I think Karen, you put together
We need a study.
a study, and we just didn't have the rooftops to support retail centers or a town village and those things. And that was a great presentation that you guys invested in back in the day, which is, which is still probably appropriate now, even though we've had a few builds. The rooftops just aren't here
We need thousands more to make it viable.
to make a
I don't
viable
want thousands.
little center where people would come and shop and do those things. So, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, originally it was town center,
Yeah.
That was our
we just
original
don't-
plan.
We just don't have. the
a
people for
combination.
that.
Yeah, we don't, hasn't worked yet, but,
I think that study was done 7 years ago.
2017.
Yeah.
So I do have one question. You talked about the, being staffed at that facility. So it's 24/7 staff. How many people are actually on shift? Per shift?
That's roughly 40 to 50.
Per shift?
Right.
Okay.
In each building or,
No, total.
right, but if there's 6 buildings,
Right.
so, okay. And then, so we're talking 180 acres,
Roughly.
150 employees.
150 to 200.
Okay, and so other properties we've sold, where we're gonna be receiving tax revenue, I'll look to Wally on
We
some
sold
numbers.
13 acres and we're getting 65 jobs and we're supposed to get about $28,000 in JED money at 1%.
So I'm just looking at the comparisons,
So
the amount of land and space versus the amount of people
65 jobs
working.
for 13 acres is pretty darn good.
Yeah.
And we have another one that went down on Clark Road that is just a little less than that, but it's supposed to bring in about $22,000 a year.
So this is 180 acres and,
The job creation isn't good on this project. I mean, the amount of money being spent is good.
Right.
But the job creation isn't that great.
The average salary is a lot higher too than what you're looking at.
Right.
yeah, I mean, I'm struggling with how you're gonna get that many
But the-
engineers to come to Perry, Ohio.
Let's go back to the property tax. The property taxes dwarf the payroll tax. Right, and yes, we started our activities here in the state in Columbus. I mean, every typical, not talking data center, just industrial project. Tax abatement, super common, right? Every project we looked at had tax abatement. So those are quite common. It is an enormous investment to get one of these off the ground, right, as you can see. And yes, there is a ramp up both in terms of an abatement schedule. And by the way, that all has to get negotiated, and the school's a big stakeholder in that process. It has to be negotiated with the village, the town, the JED. It's a negotiated, we're not dictating that. It's a negotiation. But the revenue, I mean, the numbers are enormous. And yes, it might take a number of years to get there, but again, if this were an industrial project, take that column and divide it by 10, and that's about the revenue. It's probably a 10%. So that's what you should consider, right?
I want to support economic development and growth and job creation and high-level job creation and minimal job creation too with lesser skills. But the struggle I'm having is personally, what does this do to the community? There's pros and the cons. That list for me, I struggle with because I feel a responsibility to the greater good of our community surrounding us. As Dr. Thompson mentioned, Perry Schools is kind of the main hub we have 3 Perry governments.
Right.
So this on paper, fantastic. And to create this type of jobs and the revenue and for everybody involved, that's fantastic. I'd like to see the reality of it coming to fruition and the negative impacts be reduced significantly. I would hate to see this happen and then every article and every story we've seen that we've researched, it's noise levels. The people in the community that live near data centers have there's a lot of noise and a constant humming. We're struggling with getting a cell tower in one of our communities near here because people don't want to look at a cell tower. But yet it gives them a immediate impact in a positive way.
Right.
But they don't want to look at one. So,
And there's no immediate positive, financial impact for the schools as it stands. So is there a plan that has been proposed for what to do with this cross-country course.
Alternative plan? Now you talking about middle school?
No,
High
it's
school.
all
High
school.
school.
Middle
You do
school
high
we're doing
school,
here now,
with
high
middle
school's at the
school, if you go
Y.
outside, you see it, all this paint, all these arrows and everything painted all over our campus because we do middle school cross country here, but which is, it's
Talk
unsafe.
about offering.
It's unsafe.
Well, and it's
But
difficult for
there's
the
not a lot of
kids to
parking
follow.
there.
So it is also very small.
Yeah, well, we're talking, you know, if this does come to fruition, I've talked to Ray Sines about selling me some of his property. He's got 18 acres that butts.
Well, it'd be great to be able to start
All the way to
here
Harper.
and end it here, but we can't run it here, you
Yeah,
know?
I mean, it's not a loop thing, like cross-country's not running in circles, like they go,
They have like my son ran cross country.
yeah.
It's 3,900 feet, I believe, around Leland Park.
Yeah, for a big circle.
Something
yeah.
like that,
But we
yeah.
do have trails that go in between the two woods and there's another, possibly we could purchase another 10 or 18 acres behind the village that goes all the way to Harper.
It
Was
was,
this approximately 4 miles around? Anybody know?
It's 4 miles around the Champion Farm.
That's when, okay, okay.
so if, we really like, I wouldn't be comfortable putting it to a vote until we know a plan. My opinion, anyone else feel differently?
No.
So there's no plan of what's gonna happen to it, like, that's, for what, the cross-country course, if you're gonna not put it here, what's the plan for where it goes?
Well, if the Leland Park's not big enough for it, I don't know what, there's not a lot of parking there anyway, so I don't know how you facilitate a.
So it's just gonna be
Yeah.
dead, like, we're just not gonna build,
I just think you got the land, they're gonna build their buildings and then, there's no way this can't work together. I mean, you're coming from California, I would hope you'd wanna come to our community and work with us to solve this problem. 'Cause it can be solved very simply.
No, this is somewhat eye-opening to me. I didn't recognize the significance of this. I mean, I know it's in the agreement. I've read the agreement, so I'm familiar with that. This, we've talked very little about this.
There's really two reasons why people come to Perry, right? I mean, for the schools or for their families. This is a bedroom community, you know, and we love it. And so we want to enhance that.
but if there's no financial benefit, and then we lose the cross-country course, that's not really us being good stewards of the community to put our taxpayers and students' interests aside. So,
So what had prevented you from putting a cross-country course in over the last 7 years over there? I don't know if you.
well, I think it was because we didn't know what was gonna happen to the property, so why would you
Dangerous
invest in
coyotes
that
you
if
can control.
you don't know what it's
I mean,
gonna be?
I've had a couple of people call me from your school. I'm like, sure, I'm gonna work with you, let me know what you wanna do, and they never call me back. That was just last year.
I guess the question is if we can't, because of the security issues.
Right.
I mean, this has to be hardened and there has to be a setback. You know, does it make sense to do it at that property, or do we do something creative and work with the village and the township and say, okay, from the proceeds of the sale of the land, can we acquire other land to accomplish this? There's really only two options here. You know, I don't think that we could probably run around, well, we'd have to see what the site plan is. But I would rather, I mean, if I were a kid running or a parent watching their kid run, I would rather have them running around a park and, you know, a Lee Leidig type of situation rather than around the perimeter of a facility like this. This seems, me personally. So I think we
Could
need
one
to
be
create a
built?
solution.
Could one be built on our campus with the proceeds? I mean,
We talked about that years ago,
It could be,
through the woods and stuff
Yeah.
like that.
That's where it used to be.
So
before the
it-
school was built.
but built by the village
Or,
and township for the,
Well, as part of
As part of
a
an agreement.
bigger deal.
yeah,
right. That's probably
And
another
then you're on
discussion.
campus.
right, there just has to be some, benefit to the schools within the next 18 years.
And there's gotta be enough capacity group here, if they took a look at the property and that, to be able to help us make that decision of what could work within the area. Well, we have all this brain power together, let's have some
I mean-
people in the know, come up with some options.
how does it work now? I mean, cross-country team runs, let's say, at the outdoor Y for a home meet, but yet they go to other places and run. As far as the liability concerns, I don't know what that looks
We
like.
used to run the golf courses.
Yeah.
Golf courses were great, you know, your home golf course would also be the cross-country trail and that.
Yeah,
You know, because the idea is that you don't run laps, you
Right.
run through a course that's got some, you know, sometimes they put, you know, some different, you know, undulations in, and they, you know, they like when there's a hill, because at the end, they gotta bust it and try to get through the hill, and then it just adds flavor and character to the event, and sounds like kind of minor, but it's kind of a big deal for those kids.
world-class standards,
Yeah,
of course.
there you go, world-class stand, hometown pride,
That's right. It's the kind of
Where we're
course we want.
Mhm.
so.
Is there,
I was just gonna say, I mean, the significance of this is now enhanced for me. I didn't really recognize the importance of this or thought there were other options. I mean, we're really,
Yeah, we're just,
it's an agreement that you have with the village and the township, so it's really up to you. If that doesn't go away, we'll have to figure a way to make it work. If you come up with another option and then it doesn't, yeah, that's fine, but I mean, we're sort of the tail on the dog, I think, in terms of.
so the only
So
ask of
Matt,
us is the
says
cross-country
or not,
course,
yeah.
lifting that. There's nothing else, there's no other restrictions that are in there that we're being asked to lift, just the cross-country course.
What do you think, Matt? Could we have an assurance that would allow these folks to go forward with something like that, or?
Absolutely. I mean, we would want to amend the agreement to memorialize it, but absolutely.
I think it's kind of, you know, for you folks and the village and, you know, to come to an agreement or a solution and consider other options. And then, again, we're sort of on the receiving end of that decision. Either it goes here or everyone's agreed on an alternative.
So, Madam President, if you had that kind of assurance, would you be comfortable with you know, asking for a motion or no?
I mean, we could.
Well, the assurance would have to be created now then.
Well, you can do a motion contingent upon getting an acceptable assurance of what you're needing, then you could, you know, whatever you guys need. I don't know what you need. Maybe Mr. O'Leary or somebody, you could tell us what you need, or Matt, tell us what we need for as far as the school to, you know, you said an amendment.
So I think, yeah, as far as the school moving forward, I think, you know, what we would want to do is, you know, probably today is not the day to vote on it, but to come up with an idea of, you know, if we're gonna come up with an alternative plan for the location of the jogging or the walking track, is to at least have some concept in writing on a map that shows where the alternative location is, and then maybe we can have everyone have something to look at that the board can vote on.
And it's my understanding that the township and the JED haven't finished their part of this, so we're not holding anything up by waiting for this.
That's correct. That's my understanding.
There's no purchase agreements with the other two entities, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So this isn't a holdup, this isn't slowing anything down, everything else can keep moving forward while this is worked on.
well, Mark's got some deadlines that he needs to accomplish, like probably by next week sometime.
But right now, the only purchase agreement is with the village, right? So it's not the whole 180 acres?
Well, what'll happen is if they can vote on it by probably early next week, you'll have to move forward without the township.
We have another meeting on the 15th of October, so we don't have like a huge amount of time. I mean, if something happens early next week, we certainly would be able to, in 11 days isn't a significant amount of time to hold out.
Mark? The timelines on your end, that
No, that's.
you good with that?
Yeah, because I mean, it's not like we have a full month, but we have like 11 days. So if that's, we're gonna probably wrap up if there's nothing else.
And we just, I don't think the advertisement said you were voting on.
No,
So
it didn't.
So that's what we were just discussing, you know, you'd have to call a special meeting, but wait till 15th anyways. I think.
Okay.
So I think from my perspective, just to get you what you need is like, you know, just, you know, in the next several days, we just need to come up with a conceptual idea of if we're gonna relocate this track, you know, come up with a conceptual idea where it's gonna be located so we can memorialize that in an amendment to the agreement.
Or if we can't find an area, like some kind of financial agreement that would allow us to develop it on site. Is that pretty much where we're at?
I don't think so.
Okay, is there a motion to dismiss?
Well, before, I just want to thank everybody for their time. This is, I think this is very valuable to spend this time and get in one room, speak about it together so we all hear the same thing and we know we can move forward. So thank you for the efforts of coming today and
Yeah, it's good to have everyone in the same
appreciate
room.
all your efforts because we love this community and we all want what's best for it. And so, I just appreciate the time.
Well, thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you for coming out.
Thank you.
So, before we dismiss it, we did talk, early on when we did this, that we talked about some kind of mounding for sound and that to put the mounted hills with, to reflect the sound up away from
Right.
residential areas.
So the perimeter would have like, almost like a mound
Well,
hill,
berms,
berms.
landscape buffers.
Yeah.
Walls if you want. I mean, we're used to dealing with those edge conditions.
And most of that, you can deflect that sound up that way, it doesn't carry on like a train for miles.
Okay, is there a motion to adjourn? Roll call, please.
Mr. Light,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mrs. Dexter,
Yes.
Mrs. Seoli, yes, Mrs. Holt.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.